It's time to check back with Samuel and James.
Habari ya mzee?
Mzuri.
Unaendeleaje?
Tunaendelea.
Naona ni kuvuna unavuna.
Navuna natoa ni kama misitu imekuja imefunika.
Na kwani ilitoka wapi haya magugu?
Hii niliweka mbolea. Hii mbolea. Sasa inakakuja haraka. Kashinda marakwe.
Na sasa inaonekana kweli naona.
Haionekani lakini hata tunatafuta. Lakini kama tutaweka roundup ndio ionekane ama tutatulize dawa zingine ile ya kumaliza hii makwekwe alafu ionekane.
James' entire farm is covered in weed. Remember Dwayne Johnson from earlier in this story? The Roundup weed killer James is planning to use is the cause of Johnson's cancer.
Tukakuja kuspray maneno ya polio, flight na dudu. Sasa tukawacha hatu kuspray ya kwekwe. Ndio ikakuwa unaona umekuwa msitu.
Na ulipokuwa unapanda hiyo siku tulikuwa na wewe, ulikuwa unatarajia nini?
Nilitarajia kuvuna kama gunia, kwa sababu nilipanda ilikuwa gunia moja mbegu. Nilikuwa natarajia karibu gunia 10. Lakini sasa haiwezi. Saa hii haiwezekani.
I returned to Machakos, eager to find out how Samuel's beans have fared.
Hey, Mr. Adome.
Afternoon to you.
How have you been?
We've been fine and we're still working in the shamba.
We are back.
Yeah, that's so karibu.
A lot has changed.
Yeah, a lot has changed actually. The last time you were here, the crops were not as high as they are. You can see now the beans some beans are already mature and dry. And actually we just about now to start the harvesting activity.
Samuel also tells me how climate change has affected him.
We've received very little rain. As we talk now, the last showers were in June, around 10th June. It is July now. It's almost 2 months. July has come to an end and it's almost 2 months. We've not received any rain. In fact, it's a miracle that we are coming back to the shamba. I'm back to the shamba and at least I'm able to harvest some beans.
Going by the circumstances, Samuel says he will be contented with whatever he will harvest. The advantage he has over James is that he will harvest other crops.
I have a variety of foods that my family can use. I have legumes here, these are beans. I have garden peas on the other side. I have green grams. I have pumpkins. With that kind of crops, then not all can fail. And at least in a situation like we are in now, whereby the rains have actually failed, is that the little bit you get from the beans, you get from the garden peas, you get it from the pumpkins, from the maize, is able to sustain the family until the next season. You find that...
While Samuel has measured success, James is disappointed despite incurring a high input cost. And since he has no produce to take to the market, I decide to focus on Samuel.
I'm just about to pack some samples that I intend to take to Bridges Organic Restaurant in Nairobi. See whether they can give me some order for supplying some of the farm produce that I'm producing, organic produce.
When he is done packing, Samuel heads to the bus stop. It will take him about an hour to Nairobi, Kenya's capital, if there will be no traffic. An hour later, Wadhomi is nearing the capital city. "20 minutes later, he enters Tubman Road along the city market. Within minutes, he reaches his destination. He is met by Ann Bogwa, the founder of Bridges Organic Restaurant, the only organic restaurant in Nairobi.
Hello.
Habari yako?
Nzuri sana.
Yes.
Yeah.
Karibu Bridges.
Asante sana, nimeshukuru.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What have you brought for us today?
Some amaranth, some pumpkin, some garden peas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you farming from?
Donyo Sabuk. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at what you
Some
have
of this. This one, that is amaranth.
This is
Yeah, terere. And then we have the pumpkin.
okay. Oh, it's looking good.
Then we have garden peas.
Sure. Oh, very nice. Is this Kikuyu type? Or
Yeah, the Kikuyu type.
Okay, the type that I like it. Very
Yeah.
good.
And then we also have the yellow beans.
Oh, good.
The
Are they
bean one.
green? Ah, okay.
Yeah, they're dry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, wonderful. So these ones have no chemical.
They have no
pesticides
chemical at all,
or
at all, at all.
from the
Yeah.
Pesticides and
Nothing. I'm very grateful that I've been able to meet the proprietor of Bridges Organic Hotel and restaurant, and we've talked, and I think this is the start of a partnership that will also see my farming grow and her business grow. And that is the way to go. Actually, we need to eat healthy and we all need to farm healthy.
It was nice to meet Mr. Atombe, and I'm excited because he's actually working with a group of farmers. He says he has a number of 40, and they have been farming sustainably for the last 5 years. So, and he has fruits and a wide variety of crops. So I'm excited. We have agreed I'll visit his farm and see the rest of the farmers. He's their chairman. So I'm looking forward to that so that we can create a partnership that can be of mutual benefit as we struggle to feed people with clean food, food that is organically grown and prepared in a way that is healthy for human consumption.
Samuel may have had success marketing his produce at Bridges Organic Restaurant, but his farm is less than 100 kilometers from a major urban center. He literally can hop onto public transport to get his goods to the market. But back in Moiben, Jackson is going through heartbreak that's all too familiar in Kenya's farming countrysides.
Hii nyanya vile mimi naona hapa ni kitu ya kuhuzunisha sana. Na ukiangalia mimi kama mkulima hasa inani discourage kwa sababu ya kupoteza mali kama haya. Ukumbuke hizi tumetumia dawa. Involve a lot of farm inputs na pia human labor. Ukiangalia sasa vile inapotea hivi ni hasara kubwa sana. Mimi kama hii serikali yetu ya county government kama wangetuwekea cold stores, at least tungefuna tuweke tukingoja soko. Lakini sasa ukiangalia hapa Uasin Gishu ni ile tu county government hawajatilia maanani hata kuangalia wakulima wadogo.
Jackson was unable to market his produce due to poor road network. The roads are impassable when it rains.
Hizi vile tulikosa magari juzi, hizi zikaanza kuharibika kwa shamba. Na hatungeweza kuachilia kwa shamba kwa sababu inaharibu zile zingine. So huwa inatolewa yote, hata ile imekuwa overripe inaletwa nje.
Jackson is counting huge losses.
Farm inputs zile tunatumia kama mbolea ya kupanda, mbolea ile ya kutop dress, dawa ya best na pia ile madawa ya magonjwa. Ina karimu kwa eka moja ina cost over 230,000 to 2,240. Kuongeza maji, usisahau maji kwa sababu tunanunua mafuta na mtu hata ya kunyunyiza. Kama hisi yenye unaona hapa chini ina cost over 100,000 na ujue hii ni in 3 days. Baada ya kesho kuna singine. So unaona rafiki yangu ni hasara kubwa tunapata sisi hapa kama wakulima wa Uasin Gishu. We were expecting to get 1.3 which is abnormal profit in fact my friend. But now tumepoteza ile ile initial capital na ile tulikuwa tunatarajia pia hatukupata. Na unajua usipoweza kufaulu ile manifesto ya Jubilee ya kuweka chakula, hiyo tayari tumeanguka.
To minimize the loss, Jackson has allowed tomato retailers into his farm.
Wao ndio wametusaidia kwa ile njia wameweza. Wanachukua nyanya haya, tunapima sasa, hii tunauza shilingi 700 kwa hii crate moja. Wanaenda kuitembeza kwa huko homesteads.
It was tough to hear what Jackson had to say, much less interview him in a field of rotten tomatoes. His produce mainly is for the local market, which he always doesn't access. But do farmers who export their produce have better access to international markets?
If you look at our horticultural exports, for example, last year, we had quite a substantial rejections of horticultural exports, mainly because of the maximum residue levels that were more than what is allowed in the EU. And that is on the export side. How about what we are consuming as Kenyans? Who does that monitoring? At the moment, nobody is doing. Doing that monitoring. And the few studies that have been done, all of them, if not most of them, if not all of them, have showed very high levels of pesticide residues in the products in our markets. In the 80s, we used to say, and 90s, we used to say that for every 5 households, one is either infected or affected by HIV. Today, it's for every household you know, there's someone who has a lifestyle condition. And there's a very strong link between food and disease, and food and those non-communicable diseases. And there's scientific evidence that has shown that pesticides and those synthetic fertilizers contribute to cancer, to those diabetes, high blood pressure.
Eustace Kiari is the CEO of the Kenya Organic Agriculture Network. According to him, industrial agriculture is costly compared to organic farming.
If you count it in terms of the use of the external inputs, you also count in terms of the pesticide residues that are in those products and the effects on the environment of using those chemicals on the farm, in terms of how they degrade the environment, how they kill pollinators. If you add all those costs, the chip becomes very expensive.
In 2018, the European Commission banned 3 of the world's most widely used active ingredients in insecticides. They were thiamethoxam, imidacloprid, and clothianidin. The 3 were said to be a risk to bees and other pollinators.
There's no actual usage data of different pesticides in this country. Not only in this country, many African countries, also many European countries. Pesticide usage data are in general very rare. So we don't know what the people are using unless we go to the farming communities and ask them. But what we know is that they're registered by the government in this country. So why they're still registered, we don't know.
Apart from Roundup and few other products, many of the glyphosate-based products registered by PCPB are used to control weed in non-cropped areas. But this doesn't lessen the harmful effects of glyphosate. Alva and Alberta Pilliod, a couple in the US, contracted cancer after using Roundup for more than 30 years in landscaping their home and other properties. The two so far have received the largest verdict of $2 billion damages against Monsanto.
Yeah, really, we sympathize with the situation, and we also ask that we need to find more information. Is it really true? So the jurisdictions we ask to give us this information is the same science. Okay? Science, give us this information.
Pesticides are not the key to food security, as the chemical industry would have many of us believe. Let me break it down for you. Much of the food we eat relies on bees and other pollinators to produce. When a bee lands on a flowering plant, it collects pollen from the male part of the flower and transfers it to the female part of the flower. It takes just 1 grain of pollen to make a seed in a plant. This results in the food that we eat. We, in turn, are responsible for taking care of the bees, other pollinators, and the environment. The cycle is repeated over and over again. But when harmful pesticides are used on plants, the bees and other pollinators are affected. This minimizes chances of pollination, resulting in poor yields. This in turn forces us to look for ways to increase the yields, such as using synthetic fertilizers and more pesticides.
When you use the pesticides on the crops, inevitably you'll have some remnants that remain on the crop. So what MRL means is that, yes, you've detected some, but is the amount that is detected on the produce within the safety level?
Unfortunately, the monitoring of maximum residue levels in Kenya mainly focuses on exports.
For the national market, actually no one is looking at the MRLs. And this is quite a bit of a problem, because if you, for example, look at MRLs of glyphosate in maize. So we know the MRL, they calculate it on the base of how much a European person, for example, how much maize a European person is eating. And based on that, the maximum of glyphosate is allowed in that maize. But that means if you eat more maize, then the level of MRL should go down. Which means for Kenyans, maize being one of the staple foods, the MRL should be much lower than for Europe, which is not the case.
And it's not maize alone whose safety Kenyans should be worried about.
The Kenya Bureau of Standards is on the spot for releasing 23,000 tons of this fresh ginger, apparently, that was imported from Vietnam.
Well, KEBS issued a certificate of conformity despite condemnation by the Port Health Services, which raised concerns over the safety of that consignment.
Many farmers also don't really understand why they should change. And I normally not talk about pesticides when we talk about how do we implement organic farming. I rather talk to them about how is your soil doing, and they all say it's bad. So why is it bad? Obviously because of the artificial fertilizers, the pesticides, the digging, all these things which are not good for the soil. And the most important thing is good soil. If you have good soil, you have a good healthy plant, and this plant is not going to be attacked by pests so often. So I rather go that angle instead of saying, oh no, don't use pesticides, they're bad.
Leila Libtrau is the project lead at the Root to Food initiative. She was part of the team that produced the report on pesticides.
We really need to consider how we're making organic produce firstly affordable and available in domestic markets. We should not be having to buy food in local markets at our Mambo Moga that has pesticide residue levels that are exceeding minimum acceptable standards. That's a serious concern. So we need to look at how can we create a self-containing food system using sustainable farming practices and therefore producing foods that are healthy and nutritious for us to eat.
It's high time that the relevant authorities took this up, and we not only do the regular monitoring for the export-oriented products, but also for the local market, that we protect Kenyan consumer into what they are eating by regulating the products that are being used on farm and the levels that are allowed to be in the markets. The levels of pesticide residues allowed in the market.
We are aware that there will be going to be an increased awareness for farmers. Consumers are becoming more aware, and they will continue demanding safer foods. Forget about the export, even locally here. We are sensitizing people, going to demand safer foods. And these safer foods will call for use of safer products.
Over the time I spent with farmers, I discovered serious weaknesses with Kenya's food system that should worry you. Our soils are not as healthy as they used to be. The farming practices being aggressively pushed to farmers are not only unsustainable, but harmful in the long run. Many food markets and shelves of our supermarkets are filled with produce whose origin and safety you can't be very sure about. We are now in a rainy season, but what fortunes will the rain bring if reports of increased pesticide imports, some of which are harmful to us, continue to be ignored or downplayed? You may not feel the pressure of these challenges while staring at your plate of food, but soon enough you will. It is time that we who eat food grown in our borders start taking more interest in how it is grown and how it reaches our tables. Organizations charged with ensuring we eat healthily, namely the Pest Control Products Board, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, and the Kenya Bureau of Standards, must be open, honest, transparent, and take the initiative to see better farming practices, better access to markets, and ultimately healthier foods. What is waiting to germinate if this doesn't happen is a bitter harvest for us all.